In this video, we're going to write JavaScript code to submit the form using Ajax. So as usual, we're going to select the form and then use the submit method. But before we do that, let's just go back to the form and make a small change. As we are uploading a document or a file here, we're going to need to add an attribute to the form. Okay, so this attribute is going to be the encoding type, which we will set to multipart form data. So we need to do this whenever we need to upload a file using a form. Okay, now let's go to the JavaScript file and submit the form using some JavaScript code. So I'm going to select the form using its ID, which is update picture form, and then we're going to use the method submit. So our method is going to take a function as a parameter. Okay. So first of all, we're going to prevent the default submission of the form using the prevent default method of the event, as usual. Then we're going to check a few things. So we're going to check if the file is missing first, and then we're going to check if the type is wrong, and then we're going to check if the file is too big. So to check if the file is missing, we're going to check the variable file which we created earlier. So if that variable is empty, okay, then we're going to show an error message and then return false to get out of the function. Okay, so let's write something like, please upload a picture. Okay, next we're going to check if the type is wrong. And basically we're going to have more or less the same code we've written there. So let's just copy paste it. The reason why we can do this straight away is because the user is going to select an image first, which will trigger the change function. So all those variables would have already been set. Okay, so that makes it really easier for us to just reutilize the same code. And then finally, we're going to check if the file is too big. And then again, we're going to use the same code. All right. Okay, now we are ready to write the Ajax call. Okay. But before we do that, we're going to need to understand something about how we're going to submit the data in the form. Usually, we used to use the serialize function, which took all the data that the user is submitting, and we could pass it straight away to the form using Ajax. Okay, in our case here, it's going to be slightly different because we are uploading a file. So we're going to need something called form data. So the form data is a constructor which will be taking elements from our form, especially the file we're trying to upload. So let's do a quick test. So let's define a variable, call it test, and create and store in it the objects that we're going to create using the form data constructor. So it's going to take as a parameter here the form itself. Okay, so we are already inside the form because we have selected the form right there. So let's use the keyword this. Okay, and let's just print this variable inside the console? Well, I'm not going to print the variable itself because it's going to be quite horrendous. So I'm going to print something inside this object. So we're going to get the picture inside the object. Okay. So we're going to use the get method of this object. And then this method is going to take as a parameter the name of the input. Okay. In our case, picture. Okay. So let's try this and see what we get. Okay, so let's open our console. Well, I need to refresh the page first before retrying. So let's try again. Okay, so here's our console, and we can see there, as we can see, we've got information about our picture. So you can see the size, type, etc. So that's what we get when we go to the objects we created and then use the get method. Okay, and picture. All right. So now let's write code to send the Ajax call. Okay, to save time, we can just copy an Ajax call from the previous code. Let's get that one. Okay, and we're just sending Ajax call to a file that we're going to call update picture.php. Okay, so the URL is going to be updatepicture.php. So that's a file we're going to need to create. Okay. All right. So the type is post. Okay. And the data is going to be the objects that we are creating using the form data constructor. Here we go. And then we're going to need a few other options inside our Ajax call. So this time we're going to use something called content type. So the content type will define what type of content or what type of data we are sending to the server. Okay, so for instance, if we were using JSON, this would be something like application /JSON, like that. Okay, and then we're going to define the character set and set it to UTF-8. Okay, that's what we would have for a content type for JSON. The default value that we get for the content type is usually something like application /x -sign www -sign form -sign URL encoded. Okay, you don't have to remember this. This is the default value. Okay, but in our case, since we are uploading a picture, the content type should be set to false. Okay, and that's what I'm going to do here. All right, so next we're gonna disable caching by using the cache option. So to do that, we're gonna set that to false. So what does it mean? So by setting this property to false, jQuery is going to append a timestamp to the URL. Okay, so every URL sent by jQuery is going to be unique. All right. So the browser is not going to cache it. All right. So that's what the cache property is doing. And then there is another one we need to use. It's the process data. Okay. So when we are sending a DOM document, okay, or any data that is not processed like a file like this, we would need to set this process data to false. Okay. Usually anything else that would be sending through the form other than a string would be just processed and transformed into a string. Okay. So again, if you are sending a DOM document, just make sure that the option process data is set to false. Okay, so now if the AJAX call is successful, we're going to execute a function. Okay, so for now, let's just leave that function empty. And if there is an error with the AJAX call, we're just gonna show an error message, the same one we used earlier, okay, in other AJAX calls. All right. So that's it for the AJAX call. We're going to come back to the function later. So now let's move to the PHP file. So we're going to write code inside this PHP file to upload this picture somewhere in our server. Okay.